Hello, this is Kraig Smyth, MyBizGuide, Business of Being Human. Today's topic is tools for growing through trauma. So I'm going to talk about direct trauma and indirect trauma, and hopefully this little diagram and this workshop will help people deal with their trauma. It's sort of like cross-training. I'll explain to you how it works. It's like cross-training. And here's you. If you follow my little flashlight thingy down here below the blue circle, there's you. And here's your direct trauma, whatever it may be. Most people get so used to looking at their direct trauma, right? And this is one of the problems is we have this attachment to our direct trauma. We've been with it and we've been thinking about it. And how do you work with it without bringing it back up again, right? Well, there's this thing that I call indirect trauma. And basically what it is, it's a lot of little things or seemingly little things. If someone's experienced direct trauma, these are going to be things that are kind of just a bunch of little things that everyone knows that are in contemporary society and make life difficult. But most people don't look at them the same way that they look at direct trauma. They look at abuse or alcoholism or rape or those kind of things. These are our direct traumas that we keep recycling. And wouldn't it be nice to be able to look at something else? It's funny to add more trauma, but actually by focusing on these indirect traumas, these smaller, seemingly smaller things in contemporary society, we can cross-train because we use the same skill set to grow through and disengage these many small indirect traumas that we use to grow through our direct trauma. So it's the same skill set, it's cross-training. Now, like I said, this trauma here might be rape, murder, or addiction, might be something really bad. These traumas here, right? And when I say that, when I say rape, murder, addiction, people get anxious. I'll start at the bottom over here. People get anxious. But if I talk about written law, printed currency, or a clock, which are all these, people say, yeah, what? Maybe people don't even get it. Some people might say, oh yeah, there's a lot of problems with written law and the clock and in printed currency. Doesn't have the same effect. So that is a more gentle thing for us to work on. That's a good, easy thing. It's definitely, see, so we can talk about these things without that anxiety. I know I can talk about printed currency and, you know, that written law is not recognizing natural law, and that printed currency doesn't actually hold value, it only reflects value. And yeah, no shock factor. There's no shock value to that. But those things, in a way, many of those things in contemporary society have contributed to the factors that cause direct trauma. So contemporary society, the foundations of contemporary society and all the disconnects in the contemporary society are some of the things that cause human ills mentally, and that cause people to not work on themselves and to direct undeveloped emotions outward and perpetuate trauma onto other people. So what I am encouraging people to do is actually introduce more trauma to your life. In a way, that sounds funny. Understand some of these basic things that we can talk about easily, that we can talk about the disconnects of written law, printed currency, and clocks, and watching a clock versus watching the moon. Try to disconnect from those things. Try to mentally acknowledge some of these disconnects. We'll start with the clock. Let's say this is the clock. Think about the clock. Think about how bad it is for us to be looking at a clock instead of looking at the sun and the moon in real time, in real seasons. That's a huge human disconnect there. Everything else on the planet looks at those things. Think about how bad it is for so many people to be focused on money, printed currency, versus creating the value that's traded for printed currency. Think about how bad it is that people think about the revert to written law in place of morality. So those are serious things. They probably still don't affect you as on the same level that your direct trauma that does, that your rape or murder or addiction does. By consciously distancing yourself from these things, and it's distancing but still having to work with them, right? We're still going to have to obey the laws. We're still going to have to trade money for goods and services. We're still going to have to watch the clock. We're still going to have to use them. So they're still going to be on our lives. See all the parallels happening here? They're still going to be in our lives, but we're going to be able to deal with them. We're going to be able to understand and grow an aspect that lets us deal with them and lets us say, okay, well, this is in my life, but it doesn't mean that I accept it and it doesn't define me. Just because I go to work for a living and get a paycheck and trade that printed currency for goods and services doesn't mean that my life's energy is focused towards the dollar. Just because I use that clock and say I'm going to meet somebody at noon doesn't mean that I am constantly subjugated by that clock. I can still know when the sun comes up. I can see when the sun comes up. I don't have to look at the clock first thing in the morning. I can go out and I can see when the sun comes up. I can see when the sun goes down. I can see what moon phase it is. I'll go back to money. Money is not value to me. Value are things intrinsic to life: food, water, air, soil, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual well-being. Those things have real value. Money is just helping me trade for goods and services. Law, oh, I need to obey the law. I need to obey the speed limit, those sort of things. But that's not my moral compass. That is not a substitute for my moral compass. So those indirect traumas, although they're in all of our lives, they're not a part of who we are by default. And this is the distance that we want to put to our direct trauma. Even though this direct trauma is something that we've had to deal with, it's not a part of who we are by default. There's a core element to us that we can grow distance between things that we don't want. And we can see how things negatively affect us. We can see how printed currency, clock, written law negatively affects us if we don't offset that by growing the real time, the real value, the real moral compass. We need to find the lessons from things and find their offset and find the strengths that we've grown from dealing with our traumas and appreciate those strengths, even though it was something that we wouldn't have chose to happen. It still grew our strength. We still grew from it. We still got to know ourselves. We still got to find that deep part of ourselves. And so that's what I'm hoping that this direct trauma and indirect trauma, I hope that it will give a little bit of a cross training for people to focus on some other things that are absolutely important. And then the other thing is that people trying to get out of the trauma here, this direct trauma, but all these things are here too. All these things around us, and they do actually need to be addressed. And so a lot of people feel like they're not getting anywhere because they think they're just seeing this, but in actuality, all this is present too. So that's another key point, is that there's all these other traumas, there's all these other agents of trauma all around us. So it's not just this, and we won't just get over this because there's this, and this. And it's not about getting over it. It's about what we're going to do is we're going to grow ourselves to the point that it doesn't adversely affect us. That's what we're going to do. And when we grow that way and when we have that attitude, then we actually will be okay and we'll be able to grow. We'll actually be able to thrive, and we'll hit a point that, believe it or not, that we'll actually appreciate. We won't appreciate what we've been through, but we'll appreciate the skill sets that we've developed from going through our trauma, and we will be able to use those skill sets for many, many other things in life, including helping others. So I hope that this was useful to everybody. And of course, I'm open to questions. You know where to find me. I'm Kraig Smyth, MyBizGuide, The Business of Being Human, and ending today's topic, tools for growing through trauma.